In today's video, we're continuing on our series where we look at all 31 NHL teams, where we recap their 17-18 season and look ahead to their 2018 offseason and discuss what we should expect. In today's video, we have a special guest, and we're discussing the Florida Panthers. And that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. As I mentioned off the top, today we're discussing the Florida Panthers. Now we do have a special guest joining us here in a few moments. His YouTube channel is called Flying Fluffy, and he does a lot of Florida Panther game reviews, and he covers the Florida Panthers in great depth, so it's definitely a channel you're going to want to check out once you're done here. So I highly recommend you do that. His link's going to be down below in the description. But first, let's jump in here and discuss the 17-18 season for the Panthers. Then I'm going to hand it over to him to take a look at the offseason, what to expect going forward here from this team. Now, the Florida Panthers season, really, I wanted to take a step back to last offseason before we jump into the current season, because there was a lot of things that went down that kind of really had a major impact on this team. The first big one was how they prepared for the expansion draft. It was quite mind-boggling, especially now looking back at how things have gone. How they basically gave away Riley Smith and Jonathan Marchessault to the Vegas Golden Knights. I'm sure that's a move that they probably regret now, but the fact that they made Marchessault available, considering the goal totals he put up last year in Florida, and then as well to make sure that the Knights took Marchessault, they basically gave them Riley Smith as well, and obviously they gave the Golden Knights 2/3 of their top line along with William Karlsson. So kind of a mind-boggling move. Now I understand there's a lot of players from this expansion draft that has far exceeded expectations this year, and maybe teams couldn't have predicted that. But in this case, you had a guy, yes, he didn't have a long career, but he was a proven goal scorer in Marchessault. So not really sure why they went that route, but obviously, like I said, it's a move they probably regret. But I think that those moves, and looking back, even when they fired a lot of their coaching staff before that, just a lot of questionable moves in the past year or two from this organization. But thankfully, they did have a pretty decent year. They just barely missed out on the playoffs. They finished with a record of 44, 30, and 8, which gave them 96 points, and they just barely missed the playoffs. They just missed the cut. So obviously, they're not that far away from being a playoff team. And with a few minor tweaks and additions this offseason, I would not be surprised to see them back in the mix again next season. Now, let's take a look at some of the bright spots for this team. There's certainly lots to like. I mean, obviously, some of their top guys in the forward position especially had some tremendous season. Alex Barkov had a Selke Trophy-worthy season, in my opinion. Barkov finished with 27 goals and 51 assists for 78 points. Barkov had an absolutely tremendous year. He's emerging as one of the top two-way forwards in the league. So you got to be happy with his progress he's made. I mean, Vinny Trocheck put up 31 goals. You had Dadonov had 28 goals. Huberdeau had 27. So, I mean, they got some pretty solid guys within their top six. I think they're still about 1 to 2 forwards away from really having a real solid top six that's going to pretty much propel them into the playoffs and actually have a shot at, you know, maybe moving their way up into the upper echelon of the league here. You know, youngster Henrik Borgstrom made his debut this past season. Now, he is normally a center iceman, but obviously not all center icemen come to the NHL and play that position. Sometimes they get moved to a wing. So maybe this season coming up, maybe we'll see him experiment on the wing, because he is a very offensive player. And if you put him with the right guys in the top six, maybe that'll work well. Maybe he'll develop into a winger, because they do have some decent depth at the center ice position right now. So we'll see how that goes. But seeing the debut of Borgstrom was certainly another bright spot this past season. He didn't look too bad in the games he played, and certainly an interesting bright spot to look forward to with this team moving forward. Now, obviously, besides the top forwards, I think their defense, there's a lot to like back there as well. Aaron Ekblad and Keith Yandel had tremendous years as well. I mean, Ekblad put up 16 goals and 22 assists, whereas Yandel had 8 goals and 48 assists. So they've got the puck movers on the back end. They've got some guys that can score. Now, goaltending, it wasn't too bad. I mean, there's not really going to be much change moving forward. I mean, they got Roberto Luongo and James Reimer both locked up for a number of years yet. Luongo was pretty good, but the thing with Bobby Lou is he's getting a lot of injuries later in his career. He's certainly missing more time each year after year. Injuries have been something he's battled the last couple of years. So if Luongo can stay healthy, you know, he can certainly hold this team in it. And Reimer's a pretty solid backup guy who's capable of taking on more than 20-25 games like a lot of backups see. So they are decent in goal for some time. As far as prospects go, their top prospect outside of Borgstrom is really probably Owen Tippett. I mean, Owen Tippett had a decent year in the OHL. He ended up putting up 75 points in 51 games, which is pretty good. He had 75 points the year before in junior as well, but he played a lot more games, so he put up the same point totals in, I think it was about 14 or 15 fewer games, so that's certainly a higher on a point per game level. So he's certainly developing as well. I'd say more than likely Tippett, I'm not hard to say if he makes this team next year, but he certainly will have an opportunity, that's for sure. So there's a lot to like here. The Panthers had a pretty good season. They got a decent coach in Bob Bugner, so they got a lot of things that need to stay consistent moving forward. They've got a lot to like. In the past, we've seen some rash moves to kind of shake things up, and it wasn't really necessary. So hopefully they can keep things together here and kind of move forward with what they have that's working well. So next up here, I'm going to hand it over here to Flying Fluffy. His actual name is Eric. He's going to discuss what he thinks the Florida Panthers are going to do here in the offseason. Over to you, Eric.
All right, so the question was posed to me, what do I think we should or will do, Florida Panthers, during this offseason? First thing that comes to my mind is, to be honest, just do as little as possible. Last two off seasons, it's no big secret, we've kind of broken things that weren't broken. The year before, we kind of messed around with the defense, and last year, obviously, we got rid of a couple of scorers and pretty much played the entire season 1 to 2 top 6 guys away. So I really don't think we need to do a whole lot. I think one of the biggest things that's going to come into play is what do we do with Derek McKenzie and Michael Haley. McKenzie is our captain, and there's really not going to be a lot of room for him, because if you assume that Borgstrom makes the team, you're going to slot him in on the third line, which would move Jared McCann to the fourth line, presumably, unless you're going to maybe use McCann as trade bait for something else. And knowing this team, nothing would surprise me. It would not, in the very least, shock me if they traded somebody like McCann in order to keep Derek McKenzie. So, personally, I don't know what's going to happen. I know that comes as no big surprise, but what I mean is there's just no way to really tell what they're going to do. I would like to probably see McKenzie just skate gracefully off into the sunset. Michael Haley is a whole nother thing. I don't think he's going anywhere, mainly because we don't really have anybody else that would fill that fighting role that we insist on having. And there's a lot of different younger guys that could take fourth line roles, but I don't know. Again, with the Panthers' history, I'm pretty sure we're going to see Haley playing again. Maybe not as many games as we did last season. As far as the top 6 is concerned, free agent-wise, I don't really think we have the money to do much. Dale Talon has said we have the money to go after some of the top guys. But usually what that means in Florida is we hear about the Panthers made an offer, and then somebody else will come in and outbid us because we really don't have the money to play with the big guys. And I'm okay with that. I mean, really, some people have talked about it, Tavares, and it's kind of like, I don't think Tavares is going to really do a whole lot for us in the sense of what it would mean for our salary cap position. Another couple of names that have come up, Kovalchuk, no thanks. I've heard some people whispering about defense, Jack Johnson and Mike Green. Again, no, I think we're pretty well set on the defensive end, except for maybe one veteran guy. As far as Alex Petrovic is concerned, I think he's going to be the odd man out on defense, and I think we will get some mid-range defenseman that probably only half of us have only heard of, and pretty typical Panther move. But I'm okay with that. If they just want to make a couple of safe moves, I think at this point the fan base would be pretty content with that. Our top 6 looks pretty good, depending on what you think about Nick Bukestad, in or out. Obviously, if he ends up on the third line, that means we've picked up somebody to be in that top 6, unless you throw in Owen Tippett. And that's a situation where some of us thought he had a chance to maybe make the team last year. And now, he's not exactly lighting it up at the below NHL level. And so there's really questions mark on whether or not he's going to fit in this year. And that is also compounded by guys like Toronto, who we picked up towards the end of the season. So I think most likely what you're going to see is maybe we're going to get another guy that, could be a top 6 player, and they're going to let them compete out with Toronto and see what happens with Owen Tippett. My gut feeling is that since Borgstrom will most likely make the team, my gut is that Tippett's going to get another year of seasoning. So other than that, the goalie situation, there's not much we can really do. Luongo, he's had some injury problems, but he's got that contract. He's not going anywhere. Reimer is Reimer. He's going to play well, and he's going to not play so well, and he's our backup. I don't think he's going anywhere. Our third goalie, Satieri, I always have trouble pronouncing his name. He's a free agent. I would love to see us re-sign him because he played well for us when both Reimer and Luongo were down. So, to sum it up, I hope we don't do much. The team played well the second half of the season. I don't think we need a whole lot, and I don't think the players that are out there versus the salaries they're going to want would really justify making any huge moves. I think we just keep going in the direction we are and hopefully, keep the coaching staff intact for more than a season or two. That's my take. Thanks for watching.
Great job, and thanks very much for coming on. I appreciate you coming on and take the time and speak about your favorite team, the Florida Panthers, on the channel here. So make sure you go check him out. His link's down below in the description. His channel's name is Flying Fluffy. If you like the Florida Panthers especially, you'll love his content. Now, before we go, here's going to talk a little bit about what you might see from this team at the NHL Draft. Obviously, the draft is less than a month away now. The Panthers are picking 15th overall. Obviously, as I mentioned, they barely missed the playoffs, so they're kind of in the middle of the pack amongst the draft order here. But thankfully, this 2018 draft is expected to be fairly deep, and a lot of these guys, even mid to late first rounders, are expected to become NHL players, and some of them to be pretty good ones at that. So I'm just going to give you an idea of who the Panthers might decide to take. Now, obviously, a lot of these picks are dependent on who's available at the time, but there's certainly, I think, based on where they're picking, in the middle of the pack, there should be some decent center icemen and some decent defensemen available as well. Now, a lot of the top guys in the top end of the draft here, the top 10, a lot of them are going to be defensemen, and a lot of them are going to be wingers. Now, some of the top center icemen in the draft, I think, are still going to be available around that middle pack of the draft, and there's still going to be some decent defenders available as well. So it kind of depends on which direction they want to go. By the time the Panthers pick, I think they will have a shot to maybe grab a player like Joe Veleno, playing in Drummondville in the Quebec League, played most of his junior career with the St. John Sea Dogs. I think he's got tremendous upside. They could be looking at a player like Kokaniemi from Finland. He's another player who's quite a dynamic player. And another guy as well at the center ice position that's, I think, in my opinion, is a little underrated is Rasmus Kupari. He's another guy kind of, not getting a ton of attention when it comes to the draft coverage, but he's probably going to go mid to late first round, and I think he's going to have a lot of potential to turn into a top 2 center iceman. So they have those guys they can look at, and if they decide to go the defense route, then we're probably looking at, they may be able to get Bodie Wild. Wild is a tremendous prospect, looks to be really strong now. He has committed to go into college, so he'd be a year or two away from joining the professional ranks. But I think they're a team that can be patient with that. Another defenseman they might want to look at too is Jared McIsaac from the Halifax Mooseheads. He looks pretty solid, and he's probably still going to be available around the 15th pick as well. So it should be interesting to see what they decide to do. There's going to be lots of decent prospects still on the board when it comes for their turn to pick. This is also a draft where we're expecting to see a lot of movement and trades, that sort of thing too, not just with picks but with other deals as well. So, could the Panthers get involved with that? Maybe, but like I said, I wouldn't expect to see too much out of them as far as trades and free agency this year. Probably some minor tinkering to see if they can get better for next year. Now, if you're new to our channel here, I hope you'll consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams. There's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. If you haven't followed us on Twitter as well, make sure you do that. You're going to find our Twitter handle on the screen right here. We're very active on Twitter, and we'd love to have more hockey conversation with you on there. If you're on Twitter, check it out. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.